Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this board workshop, this special meeting board workshop. I'm going to call us to order. And let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can we have a motion to accept the agenda for this workshop?
Motion to accept the agenda. Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Ordway. Roll call vote. Board Member Vanzi.
Aye.
Board Member Ordway.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Clark. The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, the topic of this workshop is Human Resources Systems, a primer on hiring, orientation, employee experience, and creating uniformity in HR practices across the sites. John.
Thank you, President Hurd. I'm just going to start very briefly and then turn it over to Melanie Jones. First off, I want to thank our HR team for putting today's workshop together. There's a little bit of pinch hitting going on. Keith has gone to our teacher recruitment fair that's happening at the moment. Melanie is here with us, so thank you very much. But I also want to put this into a context. As you know from our strategic directions, we have two pillars that are down at the bottom of the pyramid. Well, we have three, but I'm going to speak about two: the culture of responsiveness and the stewardship of resources. And as we all agree, I'm sure, our greatest resource is our human resources, and how we support our staff, how we train and provide learning opportunities for our staff, how we hire and onboard our staff, et cetera, are so very, very important. We'll also, because we've been engaged in quite a few operational reviews, you're going to be hearing more about this type of work. So happens to be human resources now, but as I'm sure you know, and we've spoken before, another time we'll be talking about the whole business facility side, that we're looking at all of our processes and structures as well. And the purpose of doing this is so that we can continuously improve. Whenever we're in this room, we usually talk about continuous improvement in relationship to academics, social emotional well-being, access to the learning opportunities students need, the equity, deep learning, social emotional well-being commitments. And obviously that is our absolute core priority. However, continuous improvement also is part of all of us, not just those who are explicitly connected to schools. So I want to provide that framework, because just as we are helping every staff member in a school participate in continuous improvement, the same is happening in our business and facilities and HR and all of our operational departments as well. So this is the first, I think, operational review type workshop we've had since I've been here, and you can look forward to others as we move into the future, as we continue to complete some of these reviews and some of the revisions that come from that review. So with that, I will turn it over to Melanie.
All right, good afternoon, trustees. So as Dr. Malloy shared, the district has been engaging in a very extensive process to analyze and review its systems and procedures and make sure that we're aligning them to best practices in human resources and that they're most efficient. We've had a great opportunity to work for the past several months with an outside consultant who is also a very experienced retired assistant superintendent of HR, human resources. Her name is Sherry Beats. We've been working with her since the month of October. And we're pleased to share with you all of the work that we've accomplished through this process to update and enhance our systems and procedures, how we plan to monitor and support the implementation of these systems moving forward, and how these enhancements are going to allow us to provide a greater level of support to our school sites and departments, and the ability to monitor issues as they arise more closely and efficiently. Okay, so I know that the documentation that we provided in the agenda is quite extensive. I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the pieces. I'm not going to go through page by page, but I'm happy to entertain any and respond to any questions that you may have. So if I move along too quickly, please, feel free to let me know that you would like to spend some more time dedicated to a certain topic. So I'd like to begin our discussion today by sharing the enhancements that we've made to our process and procedures with respect to complaints and investigations. Okay, we've done very extensive work to make sure that all of our administrators, certificated administrators, and classified managers have the knowledge, the understanding, the training, the tools, and the resources to appropriately recognize and respond to various types of complaints. Okay, and ensure that we're fully compliant with all of the legal obligations and requirements based upon the type of complaint that we receive. Okay, we've also clarified through the training that we've provided and the resources that you're going to be looking at today, how to determine whether a complaint can be responded to informally or whether we need to ensure and that it falls under a formal complaint procedure with respect to the law or board policy or administrative regulations. Okay. And so, for example, types of complaints that you're going to see in the documentation that we provided today fall under uniform complaints, perhaps complaints versus personnel, which is board policy and administrative regulations. Another federal education code would be Title IX. So we want to make sure that our administrators are fully understand and have that ability to recognize and know how to respond. Setting that aside for a minute, I want to make sure to emphasize the level of support that we will be providing district level. And I'm going to talk you through later how we're going to more efficiently and closely monitor those things so the sites are not left to their own and they have us as resources to be able to fully support and monitor things. Okay. The training that we've provided was very extensive. So Sherry Beats created the slide deck. That is the first piece of the first artifact in the board attachment, the complaints and investigations slide deck. So she created this training and she delivered it to all of our certificated managers, certificate administrators, and classified managers. So the training included how to identify and respond to those the types of complaints, how to develop an investigative plan, okay, how to conduct those interviews, create thorough documentation, interview witnesses, and how to follow up with an investigative report. And then how do we beyond that take the necessary and appropriate steps to document any concerns or misconduct with an employee. Okay, so that's going to be another part of what we're going to talk about today. But in a nutshell, that kind of encompasses our training on complaints and investigations. So that first item, as I shared, is that slide deck. And we've included it for your reference and source of information. And again, I'm not going to go through all of the slides, but at this time, if you have any particular specific questions with regards to the slide deck, I'm happy to take to let you know or respond to those questions. And I think that we've received very positive feedback from our administrators after every training that we do. The Educational Services Department sends out a survey. So if we get feedback from them that allows us to kind of reevaluate where are areas that we need to shore up when we provide training, what do we need to readdress and follow up? Are there any gaps or any missing information? The next artifact that you're going to see in the board agenda is the complaint investigation handbook. So that is the tool and the resources that the administrators and managers are going to go to where they can find all of the information that was provided in the training, all of the resources, all of this, every step that they need to follow, whether it's in regards to how to identify the type of complaint that they're dealing with, all of the steps of the investigation, and I mean, everything that they need to do to make sure that we're providing legally compliant documentation as a follow-up to that. So that's a resource that lives in our intranet and something that they have access to ongoing, and something that will be, again, a source of continuous improvement that will continue to reevaluate as necessary based on the feedback that we get from our administrators. Any questions about that first topic?
So how often, because you said that all managers and administrators have gone through this slide deck training. So this is a presentation that's given to them. So how often would they be going through this, or is it just for like new employees?
So yeah, so we've been talking about that. So HR, cabinet, in collaboration, we've talked about wanting to make sure that this is kind of where we start as a starting point, but recognizing that our new administrators are going to need to be provided training, and then also planning for next year to do refresher trainings for our existing administrators who have already gone through the training and given us feedback or things that we've observed that we need to shore up on. So it's something that we recognize that needs to be ongoing on an annual basis, or, there within the school year multiple times, depending on the needs.
It struck me too that there would be a difference in your use and therefore your familiarity with the procedures, depending on if you were administrator at an elementary site, a middle site, school site, or high school site. So it would kind of seem like refreshers would be warranted when someone changed levels mid-year or things like that, just because of the nature of the admin work at the different levels. I'm assuming on the moving up, because it seems like you get more activity at high school.
Yes, and I think that our administrators are most familiar with our board policy with respect to complaints versus personnel. And so that's something that they're more fully previously had a better, more in-depth understanding of. And I think what we've been able to do is to be able to establish a greater level of knowledge and understanding with respect to how to recognize, for example, a uniform complaint or a Title IX. But one thing I want to make sure that I point out that I didn't mention earlier is that the district has a uniform complaints officer, which is Keith Roginski, who oversees the processing, investigation, and responding to uniform complaints. So that would be something that we would be working with in collaboration with the school sites to make sure that we're meeting all the legal requirements. Same can be said for our Title IX complaints. With respect to that, if we have a Title IX complaint with regard to students, Dave Kravitz, our Director of Student Services, processes and oversees all of that. If it's a staff member, again, it's Keith Roginski, who is the Title IX officer for personnel. So it's something that we will make sure they're not doing alone in a silo and just relying on the resources, but knowing who to call, when to call, and who to call, and working with us in collaboration to make sure that, again, we're following the law and we're following board policy.
I found it really helpful how much clearer the guidebook or handbook made it about, because several of us were, I think Shelley, you were involved before you were a board member. One of those policies, right, on the complaints against personnel. And, at that point, we emphasized so much, start with informal, then go to this, but this document makes it really clear that some things come in and you have to have a decision point there about, can this be done informally or does it have to go formal? And I think that is a hugely important distinction that this gets across.
If I may, in light of that last comment that you just made, we will relook at our other policy language to be sure that we make that very important distinction. We're still committed to informal, restorative approaches to conflict and issues. That still is our commitment. However, when the law suggests that we need to be on a different page, that has to be, as you said, the first decision point, and then we move. That we probably need to make clearer in other documents as well, so that we are never in a situation where we miss that first step.
Yeah, there was one where I noticed in the board policy where the insertion of the word however there would have really liked to get people's attention that they have to pay attention there. But it also helped me understand more than I ever have before the different types. Like you hear uniform complaint, that's just kind of jargony. And now I understand really what categories that falls under. So I think this is a huge help, obviously, for the people on the ground doing the work. It's even more important, but just as board members that kind of deal with it, it's really helpful to see it. So.
Okay. All right, moving on.
Well,
Oh,
so,
sorry.
and just so I understand the scope, and I apologize, it seemed like a silly question, at least it will for me, is the scope of this to tell us these are policies that have already been changed, or these are policies that we're intending to change, like as far as all these discussions and these presentations?
So it's a combination of updates and enhancements and new layers and procedures that we are adding. So it's a combination of different things throughout this entire presentation today.
Excellent. And then, so have these been enacted already, or are they pending to be enacted?
Yeah, so all of the complaints and investigation training, as well as the handbook, has already been, the training has been provided to all of our certificated administrators and classified managers. The handbook is also in their hands. We have a few people that need to do some makeup training, but for all intents and purposes, this has been completely launched.
Excellent. And then if
This section,
section 1 is what we're talking about, correct?
yes.
All right. And then so in this for section 1, I guess one question that I had, I didn't see it as possible that it's in there.
Okay.
Is any part of it, and it was referenced, it was kind of alluded to, but if there is an investigation that has to take place with a student, is there a part of the training that offers the student the ability to say, hey, would you feel more comfortable if a parent or guardian was here with you during this process?
Yeah, and our practice is to notify parents. Most often, there are some circumstances in which we need to speak to a student and interview them, depending on the urgency and the circumstances. But we make it, it's our policy to make sure that we're informing parents anytime we're pulling students and we're having these types of interviews and conversations. And there are times when parents prefer, if given the opportunity, to be present with their student.
Yeah. And I guess that was my only thing, is like, is there a prompting so that it's not a interview and then you're dealing with kind of fallout of a parent going, I really wish that I was made available for that, or a student going, yeah, I would have felt more comfortable with my parent. Just to.
I think the message we give to principals, and this is where their professional judgment has to kind of be supreme, if I can use that term, is if there's an urgency because there's a safety concern, then we frankly don't promise that we can provide that level of connection. Where the urgency is not there, in other words, there's no reason for us to get to the bottom of something like this minute, then our ask is that we contact the parent and let them know what's happening, and we go from there. Christine, is there anything, because you're more on the ground on this than I am, is there anything you wish to add? Even though you can't do it from back there, that's no problem. But if I've done it okay, then you don't have to come up. Okay,
Excellent. Answers my question. Thank you.
Is that all for that section?
Is the training look like, if there's any sort of like, is there any sort of mechanism to ensure that there's not going to be somebody conducting the interview that could have potential bias, so that we're maybe including more people if that could potentially be an issue?
If I understand your question correctly, so for example, if we received a complaint against an assistant principal, the assistant principal wouldn't necessarily be conducting the investigation.
Yeah.
If that kind of, I'm not sure if that answers your question or I fully understand, but that's kind of what I heard.
Yeah, that or some sort of tangential relationship that, goes above and beyond just the workplace relationships. Does that make, yeah.
so one of the things that I have learned since coming to the San Ramon Valley Unified School District is it's a different context, meaning if everybody recused themselves because they know somebody, we would have trouble.
There'd be no
conducting our
interviews.
business.
Yeah.
And I say that with absolute sincerity.
Yeah.
However, this is the piece we're adding in. You are to do no work alone.
Okay.
So even if the assistant principal is charged with conducting the investigation, even if that assistant principal might have some connections as well, they are not to do that particular work in isolation of the principal. We've been absolutely clear through our trainings, Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong, that we want for the time being, because we really want to support our administrators to be most effective, that when they're dealing with issues of anything related to inappropriate words and behaviors, anything related to sexual harassment or such, anything related to issues of discrimination, call in to HR Ed Services so we can be another critical friend to the process, because we do trust our administrators, but we want to be sure that we're supporting everybody to do this job effectively. So in response, they may have connections. I'm not to suggest they won't. However, if somebody has like I've had occasion to say, I can't be a part of this conversation because I actually know everybody who's involved in it. So we've also taught what that looks like, sounds like, and we've added in the component around don't do this work alone.
Excellent. Yeah, just not done in a vacuum.
Yes.
All right, yeah. And then the one thing, and I think this still is involving section 1. I like the idea of the logging of the, and just it's in multiple places. That's really a great idea. Is there any sort of thing that is on our intranet or some sort of capacity for these forms to be kept electronically as well as physically, or is there any thought or consideration on that?
Yes, so it's a Google form.
Excellent.
And so the sites will have their own log, or do have their own log, and the site supervisors also have access to the log. So that's one way that they are maintaining collaboration and oversight and support
Excellent.
of processing those
Thank you.
complaints.
That's great.
Okay, all right, so the next.
I'm going to ask, sorry, is there any process in there in terms of the privacy for the complainant? Any kind of structure in place for
Yeah,
that?
so we're making sure that the training that we provided on the log is to make sure that's because it potentially to be transparent, it could be subject to a PRA request, right? So we're making sure that the information that we provide in the log is appropriate and that we're using really good judgment in terms of what information is included to process and keep track of the complaint, but not putting anything in there that's going to compromise student privacy issues.
And you also were really clear about who the document gets shared with and cautioned people to check that, right? That's
Yes.
reading, so.
Yes.
Are you talking about in regards to making sure that, the copy of the complaint is sent and here's who's following up with the complaint, here's who's on the investigation. I think I read that in the presentation as well. I think that was very clear. It checks all the boxes.
And we do everything possible to maintain confidentiality to the best extent possible. Obviously, when we're conducting an investigation, there is a level of confidentiality when you're interviewing and conducting an investigation that you can't fully maintain, but we try to be very thorough in terms of the people that we interview and all of the complainant as well as the person involved in the complaint, that we try to do the best that we can to maintain that confidentiality for all parties involved. All right, so the next section builds on the work that we just discussed with respect to complaints and investigations. So in the event that the results of an investigation necessitate the need for the district to document concerns or misconduct with an employee, administrators are going to utilize what we refer to as the FRISC paradigm. So the purpose is to ensure that the district is creating legally sufficient documentation. Okay, and that to make sure that we can defend against potential challenges from a complaint of discrimination, maybe a grievance, an unfair practice charge, those types of things. We want to make sure that our administrators, as they're documenting and following up with employees, that it's legally sufficient. That's really important. So this paradigm addresses what should be included in the documentation. This first set of this slide deck was a training that was developed and provided to our managers by Keith Roginski. And as of last Friday, all of our, again, certificated administrators and our classified managers have been trained on the FRISC paradigm. Okay, so we utilize this paradigm to document and to utilize progressive discipline to guide employees, to communicate our performance expectations, to motivate and foster improvement by providing very clear feedback and reinforcement for positive performance. So it's very clear. It's a recipe that can be easily followed. All of our administrators also received a copy of this Frisk book, which is a great resource because it's geared toward the educational system in a school district, and it has very practical examples and tools and templates with regards to an educational setting. Okay, so that's great. And again, this was a very hands-on training. So the administrators and the managers were engaging in a process of evaluating the outcome of an investigation, which is really important. So we feel that hands-on training and practice, as you referred to earlier, Trustee Hurd, in identifying those complaints and how to go through these processes is important. So evaluating those outcomes, determining the effective, the most appropriate action to take with an employee, and then to apply the Frisk paradigm to draft documentation, which would be provided to an employee. So what you have in your handout is a copy of the slide deck, also a copy of the scenarios. These are real life scenarios that we used. And then they also, again, engaged in that, worked within their small groups in the training to develop that draft and utilize that Frisk paradigm hands-on. And again, very positive feedback for an effective training once again, which we're very pleased with.
Yeah, like a lot of these examples, right, that are very clear, gives like bad examples, good examples, because when usually when we're given feedback like do better, what does that mean? Right, like
It's very scaffold and breaks it down and is very clear and easy to understand. It's not a complicated paradigm. It's simplified in a way that everybody could utilize it and apply it to any type of situation where they need to document any concerns that we have from a district perspective.
It really drove home to me how we've talked about the need for documentation board level for a long, long time. This makes it like, how do you do it? And we really like a useful framework for it.
Yeah, it's something that I think, my first year as an assistant principal a long time ago was trained to use, and there is nothing out on the market that I'm aware of that even comes close to providing this level of support in terms of a resource. It was developed by a labor and employment attorney, Steve Andelson with AALRR. And it's just a very timely, it's a timeless resource, if you will. It's been around for a long time, but it continues to be one of the most prevalent resources used in education for this purpose. Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about are coaches. And we're going to focus on the enhancements to the district systems and procedure with respects to coaches. The coach handbook has existed for quite some time. And again, this is an example of something that we've improved and enhanced. We've really focused in this cycle of inquiry and evaluation, focused on our volunteer coaches. And so the coach hiring procedures have been updated and enhanced to include a more thorough vetting process for volunteer coaches. So moving forward, volunteer coaches are going to be required to go through the same process that we utilize with our paid coaches. This includes an application process, an interview process, a thorough reference checking process, mandated training, coaching certifications, and extensive fingerprint clearance process. The coach's handbook is something that all of our coaches are required to read, have knowledge of, understand, and to be able to, because they are obviously held accountable for knowing all of the information in the handbook. In fact, prior to each season, they're required to read it and acknowledge that they've received it and they understand it. So going into the season, that's how we're making sure that we're adhering to all of the district policies and procedures. The handbook is quite extensive. And again, this is a collaborative effort with our business department, ed services, and human resources. And so you can see by looking at just the index there, it provides an overview of expectations that we have for coaches, information about eligibility, first aid and safety, what their fiscal responsibilities are, facilities usage, information about how we transport kids and if we have team drivers, communication, and just making sure, again, that they have full knowledge and understanding of what their expectations and responsibilities are for their role, because we know that they're working very closely with students, and that we want to make sure that everybody is consistent with following our policies.
So a question, and things may have changed quite a bit since last time I was a teen parent in a high school of 13. But is there an extension of sharing what's in this document with teen parents? Because this had a lot of really great stuff in it that I think is new since I was water polo team mom, which I think was super helpful, because I remember the dynamic when you had new coach every season. Team parent was kind of the person who oriented the coach, and we didn't know all this, and the coach needs to read all this, and you wonder sometimes, is that brand new coach and has to stand up to these parents that have been, kind of a key part of it for a number of years. It just seems like there's a logical extension there, maybe with ADs training team parents or something.
That's a very good question and a great idea. We'll follow up with them. We'll make note of it and follow up. We're getting, so this is an aspect of the process that we're in the process of implementing now. It hasn't been fully launched. Again, the handbook itself is an enhancement, but that's a good idea.
This addressed so many things that I remember were sticky, right? And we're sticky because things changed over time and things got tighter, but people had history. And so this is really good stuff.
And you make a good point that it's important for parents to know what the expectations are and what the responsibilities are in working with students.
There's kind of the next level down part of the volunteer coach, right? Their volunteer role, but they need to know the guardrails too.
Correct.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I was glad to see, because I was looking for the part about fundraising and snack bars, because those have been issues that parents have had. And trying to, as you said, stay within the guardrails, especially at the high school level. So I'm glad that that's in there. So all the team parents need to.
All right, the last artifact in this section outlines the updated clearance guidelines for volunteers, independent contractors, and consultants. And it really outlines the level of clearance through Be a Mentor, for example, that they're required to have for the various types of volunteers to the district. Are all of you aware of the Be a Mentor system? Wonderful.
Can I ask, with the coaches section, that also includes the folks that help out with, for example, marching band or various clubs? you know? like-
So we are in the process of making sure that we bring in all of the athletic extracurricular coaches as well. That's part of the plan. That's still ongoing in terms of developing and implementation, but that will be the next phase of what we address as well. And the reason why they're not necessarily included in this handbook is because the nature of the support and volunteerism is very different from the athletic aspect of things. So for example, we have a lot of volunteers with band, music, extracurriculars, mock trials and things like that, that we want to make sure that we cover, but the nature is a little bit different. So that's something we're going to be continue to work on. Any questions about this section? Okay, I'm going to move on. This is one of my very favorite topics to talk about. So the HR department has developed a plan to increase new teacher diversity to the district and also to retain diverse teachers to the district. So we developed a two-phase plan that we have implemented this year. And the plan included the formation of the use of a working group consisting of teachers, site administrators, district administrators that have met a number of times to really review and analyze all of our recruitment strategies and hiring protocols with the strategic directions in mind and a focus to reduce and eliminate inherent explicit and implicit bias and to create access and opportunity for all applicants. Okay, so site administrators are going to be receiving training on these revised procedures and protocols in preparation for the new recruitment season that we're just now launching. And they're going to be receiving this training in just a few weeks. So the first artifact that you're going to see is actually training that has not been provided. And basically it is setting the stage for fair, appropriate, lawful, and equitable interviews, which is a result of all of the work that the working group has done to, again, look at all of our hiring protocols. So for example, what we've done is we've revised our EdJoin application. We've augmented it to include supplemental questions that are related to our strategic directions to get a sense of applicants as they apply and provide additional screening information as we determine who we're going to bring in and interview as part of our recruitment process. Another thing that we've done is we've created an application screening rubric to screen applicants with fidelity. So because of the size of our district, we do not do centralized screening for teaching positions, for example. All of the screening happens at the site level with principals and assistant principals. That also includes all of the interviewing process, the reference checking. So the review and the changes and the enhancements that we made is to provide that consistency and making sure that we're approaching with the lens of our strategic directions and wanting to make sure that when we have the ability and opportunity to increase the diversity to the district, that we're doing so. The next thing that we've done is we've revised our certificated interview questions. So this is a bank of questions that our school sites can use. And these are also questions that we utilize for our recruitment fairs for teachers and filling certificated positions. So we happen, as Dr. Malloy shared earlier, we happen to have a recruitment fair happening here at the district office this evening. So we are focused on this evening recruiting elementary educators as well as special education educators. And so they're utilizing a lot of these processes that we're sharing with you this evening. The next thing that you're going to see there is the interview rubric. So that's to guide the assessment of applicants and interviewees in the process. So you can see that we've utilized what we did with the working group. We spend a lot of the time really looking at research, reading research, engaging in discussion in terms of what are best practices that is out there right now. What does the research say in terms of how we are going to improve and increase the diversity to our district? So it really started with a lot of discussion, and we were able to have a wide, diverse variety of working group participants who have experience and have knowledge and have just perspective on, so for example, we had a couple of our equity liaisons participate in the working group. So they have their perspective and experience that they and knowledge that they can share with us. And so it was very rich discussion that really helped guide and review all of our processes, which we're really pleased with. And then after we engaged in all of the research discussion, that's when we started to systematically look at all of our hiring protocols. So taking us back to the next thing is kind of really looking at our reference checking process and making sure that we're doing a very thorough job in the reference checking process and establishing very and updating very clear protocols and how that can happen. So for example, we want to make sure that we're not engaging in reference checking through email. That's not necessarily best practice, right? We want to make sure that we're talking to current or former supervisors who have direct knowledge of an individual's work performance and work history, and just making sure that, again, it's applied consistently throughout the district. And then a copy of our new hire packet, which we've continued to evaluate and update and improve as we go through. And another way that we do this is that we have instituted an exit survey for teachers who have left the district, and that kind of really applies to the phase 2 of our plan. So phase 2 of our plan is to utilize the exit survey and feedback from teachers and employees who leave the district to identify and develop strategies to increase our retention rates for diverse teachers and employees to the district. And this is the first year that we've instituted it, and something that's been very, very helpful to us and kind of looking at and utilizing a cycle of inquiry to improve. So for example, we've got some feedback on how we can improve our benefits process for new employees in the district. And that's something we've gone through a cycle with. We're going to reevaluate and kind of go back. And so that'll be something that's, again, it's a continuous cycle of improvement with that exit survey, and something that we'll be looking at and talking to sites in terms of what are best practices that we can employ at the site level to assist with the retention of employees, because that responsibility doesn't just fall with the human resources department or ed services. It really also, the site is an integral part of the culture and the systems that we have in place to support our employees.
Can I ask, with the exit survey, is it an interview, a one-on-one interview, or is it just literally a form that someone
Right
fills out?
now, it's a form, but we're looking on how we can expand upon and improve upon that process.
And is it a form with write-in, or is there like a checkbox answer? How do you do that?
So there's a lot of open-ended questions in there. So there's some questions that are, multiple response, because we're trying to collect some data, but we're also trying to get subjective information as well to individuals' experiences that they've had in the district. And so, yeah, it's a combination.
And is there the option for them to have union representation at that? If it's well, I guess it's not an interview, it's a survey.
It's all,
so,
it's a survey.
Well, and it kind of seems beneficial to have a survey, and then you could leave a question that's, would you like to have an interview, right? Because I would imagine a lot of people who are on their way out are just kind of done, but some might have a desire to let you know. And survey, keep data. We do an easy opportunity for everyone and for those that feel strongly about something.
About following
You
up
could
and getting
circle
more
back.
information. Yes.
Because you wouldn't want to ditch the survey and then have nobody come for an interview and then now you don't have data.
Right, right. And it's tied to the resignation and retirement process, or, well, it's one form, but the resignation process. So when they submit their resignation, that's embedded electronically in the form. So it takes them to the survey and they complete that process. So things are kind of fresh in their mind.
Other questions about this section?
Okay, so the last thing, there isn't any artifacts on this last topic that I wanted to cover with you. But I just wanted to make sure that we covered the enhancements that we have done this year with respect to our substitute teachers, because we think that's really important. We have updated our substitute handbook. We've even worked with our Director of Equity, Hong Nguyen, to make sure that, again, our strategic directions and those perspectives and values and priorities that we have as a district are also embedded in with our substitute teachers. We're currently in the process of developing more extensive training for our substitute teachers to make sure that they are fully aware of the strategic directions, our priorities, and how we handle certain situations at a school site with our students that can be sensitive in nature, and wanting to make sure that they are fully aware of the district's, policies and priorities, and making sure that when things come up, obviously they're not going to be handling things on their own, but they need to have an awareness because they are the ones that are in the classroom with students every day. And we want to make sure that that's something that is at the forefront and something that they're fully trained and aware of.
Can you explain the process of becoming a substitute teacher? What is there? Are there background checks? Is credentialing necessary? How does that work to become, and then that onboarding between applying and being in front of the kids in the classroom?
Yes, so we they have a application process that they have to go through, and this is done in the certificated HR side of our department. So it is an application process. We have a very thorough reference checking process as well. And so that's something that we make sure that we're carefully vetting our substitute teachers going forward. And for all of the substitute teachers that we extend an offer of an employment to, our Director of Certificated Human Resources, Carrie Vandestar, she reviews all of the application and references and all of the information provided to make sure that those individuals that we are hiring are in line with all of our expectations in terms of what we're looking for in a substitute teacher coming onto the district. In addition, our substitute teachers also engage in they must have a credential. So they need to either have a multiple subject or single subject credential. If they don't have a background in teaching, they do have to have a substitute credential, which we assist with them in applying for through the county. We're our own entity. So we apply for those credentials ourselves for those individuals, and make sure that they're meeting all of the background and requirements for that 30-day substitute permit. And then in terms of the background clearances, they're also required to go through the DOJ is something that we've done for quite some time in terms of fingerprint clearance. We've enhanced our processes with the district recently, as you may be aware, to include the FBI as well as NASDAQ. So the FBI fingerprinting process is not required in the state of California, but something that we wanted to enhance. That way, if there are any subsequent arrests or any background or information history on an individual from out of the state of California, we would potentially have access to that information. And then the NASDAQ is a clearinghouse and it's a repository of information that's technically it's nationwide for participating agencies that allow us to become aware of individuals who hold credentials and or licenses that may have had some kind of negative implication. Maybe a credential was suspended, maybe there was a reproval on their credential in another state and they came to California. We have access to a repository that would give us that information to help us make sure that we're doing an extensive vetting process.
I have one other question, kind of piggybacking on what Laura was talking about. Is there, because we have substitutes that will come in for a handful of days a year. And then there's other substitutes who might come in for somebody who's on medical leave or they're out for months at a time. Is there any sort of number of days that then triggers additional training, like you would almost be onboarding a teacher at that point?
Yes, so we partner with our teacher induction program here in the district, which is SRVTIP. So if we have someone in a long-term sub position who has not completed and who does not have a clear teaching credential, we partner with the SRVTIP to provide a mentor and a coach to make sure that they have, and they go through the induction process and we oversee all of that while they continue to complete all of the requirements to, if they pursue clearing their credential, but we provide that mentoring and coaching too.
Excellent.
I assume that all of this background check also applies to classified staff as well.
All employees in the district. Yes, good question. Okay, I think that concludes all of the information that I have for you today, but I'm happy to take additional questions.
And just before you might have some additional questions, I also want to give my thanks to the entire HR team, to the Ed Services team and others who've assisted, because I am grateful for the extensive amount of review, analysis, evaluation, and then product. And Melanie, there's a few other things on our list of to-dos going forward. Can you remind me of a few other things that we're still trying to review? I'm thinking about the tracking sheet. Is there anything else that we haven't accomplished? Christine, you might be able to assist us as well.
I believe these are all the overarching areas. Christine, am I missing anything?
Okay, good. So then the only thing I will add is we are ensuring that when we think about new leaders and ongoing sustaining effective leadership, that's part of our leadership development plan. Aspiring leaders, frankly, don't get into these types of granular details because they have no ability to practice what we're talking about if they're in the aspiring program. But certainly our new leaders need extensive support, as Melanie said so articulately, and then our leaders need regular ongoing support as well. So that's also a part of the plan. And as I said at the beginning, our goal is to be excellent in all areas, academics, of course, but also operationally, and to be supportive of our staff, to be the most effective professionals that I know they are, and that we can continue to strengthen that. So from when we hire them to how we onboard them, how we support them, how we provide kind of appraisal type dynamics, and frankly, and hopefully very seldom when we need to deal with complaints and investigations, that we have it all sorted out from start to finish. So that was our goal, to bring all of this to you today. And again, as Melanie said, if there's any comments, questions, or thoughts that you want to add, this is our only workshop topic today. We kept it short because, as you all know, we've been together a lot this week.
Melanie, I had one question related to continuous improvement on this whole package. Do you plan on interviewing the attendees who took all this training or are going to take the rest of the training on a regular basis to find out like what they feel like they need more of or deeper dive on?
I'm going to refer that question to our Assistant Superintendent Services, Christine Guajardo, because she oversees that process.
Right, good afternoon. Thank you, President Hurd. Yes, the answer is yes. We continue to not only revise through the feedback loop and the surveys that we offer administrators after each training. Often we take the documents while they're in their initial stages and reach out to several administrators on the ground and ask them to have eyes on that to see if there's anything that is unclear, needs more work, more support, and really kind of test the product, if you will, before we kind of roll it out to the larger group.
It seems like with our attention on see something, say something and all our equity work, that there is a need at the moment for more interviewing of students, right? To get to the bottom of things when they come up. And it would seem to me like conducting investigations or just interviews of students would really be an art that you continue to develop. And, just waiting time between questions and reading the body language and all that important stuff that, as parents, we try to do, but as administrators, you're dealing with a whole lot more kids.
I think it's also where the supervisor administrator role is really important. And our supervisors are highly trained and coached and work with our administrators around kind of navigating those situations. So often the first phone call is always to the supervisor. And part of that conversation is really navigating, what are you doing? What's being asked? What are things that you think you've probed, things you haven't probed, and really that back and forth kind of checks and balance between each other to make sure that every stone is kind of turned over and examined, because it is an art and it's also something we are trained in. But I think it's not until you're on the ground and you're actually in the moment with children that you have to really check in with someone and have that partnership.
If I can add, and special thanks to Christine and her team. There is extensive research on the effectiveness of the principal supervisor role. And we are following that research in terms of creating the right conditions, providing the right support. I know we always had some form of connection between district office and school, but I would say under your leadership, Christine, we have strengthened that particular relationship. When I'm out in the schools with all of you, you've noted that for the most part, the supervisor is there with us. And that's on purpose, because you and I are not the supervisor of the principal. And I don't ever want to say anything in those meetings that would in any way negate that very important relationship. But that relationship also allows us to see, hear, and learn what we need to do better with. So part of what we've asked Christine and the team to do is to engage very much in an informal way too. Formally, yes, but informally as well. Because then in cabinet on Tuesdays, it's built into our structure now. What are we hearing? What are the questions? What are the gaps? What are the concerns? So I would say we have a bunch of feedback loops now at cabinet where we check in on everything from what's happening with the supervisors to what's happening with committees, et cetera, so that we can be sure that we aren't kind of leaving stuff out there without closing that loop. So to your point, very specifically, one of the things we've asked the supervisors to pay attention to is some of these complex operational issues that we have to do effectively. And that we say to our principals, the only mistake you'll make is not telling us you need help. Because anytime people say, I'm getting afraid, I'm going to make the only mistake that's problematic is not telling us you need help. You need help, we are totally fine to provide it, and we will support you. So that has become our key message so that we don't have any issues going forward. And thank you so much for making the time to do this, as I said, on a week where we've been together in this room for a number of hours already, but I think it was, so this month was human resources. Next month, we're going to take a deep dive into everything on the learning side with deep learning and grading and assessment. And then I know the next one after that is going to be more into the business world as we do the budget workshop. And the one after that in early fall is going to be the whole facilities piece. So we've got a whole plan of doing some of these. I mean, obviously some learning agenda next month, but then some will return to the operational reviews after that.